You and to our Ask Me Anything series about the bar exam. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jackson Mummy. I'm glad to be with you today. For the last 25 years or so, I have been preparing students to take their bar exam successfully around the country. And in today's session, which we're doing as a Facebook Live session for our registered students, and then we're going to repurpose this and put it together as a podcast and make it available and probably publish it on our Facebook page for the broader audience as well. So, but I've asked our existing students to come online, and I've got my assistant June who is manning the chat box today, so that as you come into the Facebook Live group, and if you've got questions for me, go ahead and type them into the comments box. June will pass them on to me, and I'll be able to hopefully respond. And really our purpose for the next 25 minutes or so is to just give you the opportunity to ask me anything that's on your mind right now about the bar exam, what's happening, news and things that are going on. And of course, I have a big piece of news that I want to be talking about, and that big piece of news will be with respect to the Georgia bar exam and some of the things that have happened in the last few days. And there's been some pretty extraordinary stuff going on. As we get into this today, I just want to make sure that everyone is able to see and hear me. So if you do see me, if you would just let me know that, or type a note in the box so that I can make sure that you all are with me and that you can hear me, that would be great. And we should be good to go. All right, good. I think you all can see me. So if you do have comments or questions, by all means, type them into the box. June will forward them on, and I will respond to them. And while I'm waiting for some of those specific comments and questions, let me bring you up to date on a big news story, sort of a breaking news story that happened just a couple of days ago. September 6th, there was a notice. Again, a relatively quiet notice. I say again because it's sort of been that kind of a week where the National Conference of Bar Examiners have made several big changes, and they've just sort of quietly slipped them in. No press releases, no discussion. And in the midst of all of that, there is this very weird story that comes out of Georgia, in which the Georgia Bar Examiners announced on Tuesday that there were 90 bar takers of the July 2015 and February 2016 bar exams that the examiners had identified as failing the exam. They'd sent them failing notices, treated them as if they had failed. Well, whoops, our bad. Apparently those 90 people passed. This is crazy, crazy news. It's crazy on a lot of levels. First of all, it is being acknowledged by the National Conference of Bar Examiners as the worst bar exam, bar apocalypse, whatever you want to call it, bar mistake that they can remember. Certainly, a challenge. So that's where it begins. Now, I know that we've got a fair number of you who are watching today who are waiting for your bar results. I see Marisol, Jerry, glad to have you guys with us. As you're studying, as you're waiting for results, and you hear something like this, that the bar examiners in a major state go, oh, whoops, our bad, we screwed up. Well, that doesn't exactly inspire confidence, does it? And it is an extraordinary circumstance. Now, I just want to share with you a couple of things, and then we'll kind of get into the details of what we think happened and what that might mean. But the announcement is made on Tuesday. Tuesday night, I'm at home watching, I don't know, Rachel Maddow or something. I don't know. And my phone rings. So it's later in the evening, and I recognize the name. It's a former Georgia bar student who took the exam with us in February 2016 and who had failed by 1 point. And it was devastating for her. It was understandably just horrible to be that close and find out you'd failed. And when I saw her name and I'd seen the news report earlier in the day, I thought, oh my gosh, could this be? Well, in fact, it was. She was one of the 90 people that ended up passing the bar exam. And she was apparently at the mall or in the store. She got a text or a phone call from the examiners, really weird, telling her that she had passed. And she's just sobbing. She's just, the emotion of all of this, I think, was just overwhelming. And it was really an extraordinary moment. Now, I'm telling you the story from my perspective, but I invited her to come on to a hangout. Those of you who are with me know that I do these periodic hangouts with students to tell their stories. Her story is pretty amazing, and she's agreed to do that. So next week after, we're going to have that hangout. We'll do that. We'll get it up and record it and send it out to everybody. It's an incredible story, though, to imagine being on the hook, thinking you'd failed. In fact, she'll tell you in her particular story, she just gave up. She just was so frustrated by failing by a point that she said, forget it, I just can't climb the mountain again. To go back. She was not a first-time taker, I think, going in, and she was so discouraged and so upset. Well, the upshot of all of that is that she's one of the 90 people. So what did happen, as best we can tell, in Georgia? I want to share with you some of the information that we have. It's kind of sketchy, to be honest, but here's what we know, or think at least, happened. On August 4th, a Georgia bar exam employee discovered an error in recalculating scores for some exams that affected exams both in July 2015 and February 2016. The employee caught the error, apparently, while filling out an applicant's Georgia bar exam history. This applicant wanted to apply to another state. And the bar exam results for the applicant indicated the person had failed in July 2015 and passed the February 2016 exam, but when they looked at that, they said, wait, something's wrong. That doesn't make sense. It couldn't be that way. And they found out the student had actually passed in July 2015. So apparently, according to the Georgia bar examiners, for a month, a solid month, from August 5th to September 5th, all they've done for a month is to look at bar exam scores from those two exams and subjected them to what's called a forensic audit. What they at least are saying is that for both of those exams, there was a problem in the formula that was used to scale any re-exam or regraded exam scores. Now, what you have to understand in Georgia is that the Georgia bar examiners grade exams a second time. It's a second read if the scores are within 5 points of the overall passing score, which in Georgia was 270. And half of that 270 comes from Georgia scores, the essays and PTs, so 135 out of Georgia and 135 scaled on the multi-state bar exam. So then after these exams are regraded, the raw scores are then scaled again so that they're consistent. At least that's the thought. Well, that process is called psychometrics, and the psychometrics are supposed to be consistent from exam to exam to exam. So that's the first problem that occurs. Apparently the psychometrics were not consistent, and therefore that threw off one set of the exams. But there was a second problem. It wasn't just the psychometrics. Apparently, the bar examiners used different methodology to calculate scores. Are you kidding me? Different methodology to get a different result. So when the board went back to return to the prior methodology, that resulted in passing scores for some test takers who were previously informed that they failed. Wow. I mean, that's mind-boggling. What did the examiners say about it? Well, we've conducted a thorough investigation and discovered the cause of these errors. This is not going to happen again. That's really not very reassuring. And they sent out a letter to affected test takers, and they said, we'll reimburse your fees for the subsequent exams. I don't think that includes paying for bar review courses or lost wages or anything else. And then they say, sort of, in passing, we know that your investment of time and effort greatly outweighs the additional cost of the examination. You think? Pretty extraordinary stuff to me. One person who failed the exam wrote, and I saw this, and I'll give attribution to Above the Law, though I hate to do that. But one person who failed said, here are my questions. How am I to believe that it's an exact, even, easy number of 90 people? The number is pretty suspicious. And how am I supposed to believe that your office will fix this when you've screwed it up? At least 90 times over the course of 2 separate and independent consecutive exams. I think that's a fair question. How do I know that there aren't maybe 130 errors or 200 errors or whatever number? How do I know that it's not 3 exams going back or 4 exams and just 2? And Georgia's never allowed people who failed the exam to get their essays back. A lot of jurisdictions do that. Florida does it. California does it. New York, pre-UBE, did it. But Georgia's never done it. So there's no way to actually look at the essays and see what was going on. And then, what are you doing? So why not send all of the people who failed, why not send all of their results back to an independent outside set of state graders and do it immediately? So that's what was being asked. My guess is in all of this, and it's just a guess at this moment, but my guess is we're going to see some sort of class action lawsuit. We're going to see some activity legally against the Georgia Bar, maybe against the National Conference of Bar Examiners. And it's really interesting to me that the National Conference and their president, Erica Mosier, she actually commends the Georgia Bar for being forthcoming. And I guess in a weird way, she's right. It certainly is better than, in some ways, I guess, than not saying it and not correcting it, certainly. But I've never known, in my 25 years, I've never known the bar examiners to really admit anything even close to this kind of a mistake. Now, there have been some mistakes in grading over the years, but they have been very minimal. In 2003, there was a scoring error on one question in the MBE. And that resulted in a change of over 7,000 scores, but very few people passed. Like one or two people passed as a result of that change. There was a problem in the late 1990s in New Jersey that affected 13 students. One of the big, in 2007, South Carolina made a change that affected about 20 people. I mean, so there are these really small pieces, but there's never been anything this size. And I suspect that part of the reason for that is that the bar examiners are not really willing to acknowledge their mistakes. They don't want to go down that road for precisely what's going to happen now. Georgia's admitted their mistake. I at least give them credit, I guess, for that. But they're almost certainly going to be sued. And it's almost certainly going to lead to a crisis of confidence. And I think that's the last thing the bar examiners around the country really want. And so I suspect that there have been times when there have been similar kinds of problems. I don't see this as something really unique to Georgia. And the examiners have simply covered it up. They've swept it under the rug and said nothing about it because to make a change would actually be worse for them than to not do that. So I think that is a huge, huge problem. And I think it's a story we're going to be watching, and we'll see what happens. I think you're going to love to hear from Kimberly when we talk to her about her results and what this was like for her. I have to agree. I think that it's probably pretty neat and comfortable to say only 90 people and only these two exams. If it's two exams, I don't know why it's not more exams, to be honest. And I don't know why it's capped at 90. That seems odd to me as well. If you're talking about a single exam, a single error, that's one thing. But this seems more systematic to me, more systemic, if you will, and pretty scary stuff. I see we've got more folks coming on. Hi, Tiara. Good to see you. Thanks for being with us. And again, I want to invite all of you that are online, if you've got questions about this or anything else, to let me know. I want to make sure that we address all of that. Well, one of the questions I am getting is, okay, so there's this major screw up in Georgia, and it impacts confidence. What do I do? I'm waiting for exam results to come out from the July 2016 exams. Should I be confident in those results? Well, no, I don't think you should. On the other hand, I don't think you have a choice. I think that there's enough reason to believe that the bar examiners collectively are having real problems understanding all these changes. The change to a seventh subject, the change in scoring, the modifications as we add UBE. I frankly think that New York is going to be a firestorm when those results come out, having switched to the UBE and its scoring. I think there are a lot of places in which we could look and say, this is not pretty, and these scores are not particularly good, and we don't have a lot of confidence. Not a lot of examiners are transparent. They don't show what they do. They don't explain the methodology, and when they do explain it, they explain it in such obtuse ways that really and truly virtually no one understands what they're doing. If you've ever tried to read the explanations of how scores are calculated, for example, in Florida or in California, it'll just make your eyes cross. It is amazing. So should you be confident in those results? Well, no, I don't think I think skeptically you probably shouldn't be. However, they are the results and you got to live with them. So the obvious answer is you don't have to like them, but you're going to have to live with them. I think that we will see fairly broad legal action happening, certainly in Georgia. I wouldn't be surprised if this actually turns into a firestorm that has broader implications, and I wouldn't be surprised to see lawsuits filed against the National Conference for greater transparency and disclosure. This was really reminiscent of something that happened many years ago. There was a problem with disclosure of essays, no examiners at one time released model or sample essay answers. And there was the threat of a lawsuit against California examiners to release theirs. And there was a settlement made prior to litigation really getting underway or commencing, in which the examiners agreed that they would release some answers that would be used potentially as sample or model, which sounded good. It sounded like it was good information for everyone. And examiners around the country tended to do that. The interesting part was that what the examiners actually did was not give a single set of model answers, but they provided wildly different styles, wildly different results in specific answers, different rules of law, different construction, different everything, such that you couldn't draw any conclusion from the answers. And I've said elsewhere that I think that what they were doing at that point was trying to protect themselves against a lawsuit from someone who said, I did what you told me to do in these model answers and I wasn't successful. That the examiners have simply said, well, look, we're giving some answers out. They came from the portfolios of students who passed. We're not telling you that they were great answers. We're just saying here they are. And I think in a sense, that sort of reluctant transparency may be what we're also considering and looking at here. So I think that we're maybe on the edge of something where the boiling points are beginning to reach over. Law schools are really angry and unhappy with the scoring and with the result that it's creating to them. And I think that at the same time, bar takers are unhappy with what they see happening, and the bar examiners are becoming more and more reclusive, less and less transparent. And I think that's a huge issue. So I think that it bears watching, but I think you still have to prepare and get ready just as you would normally. There's nothing in this particular story out of Georgia that tells us you should do something differently, that you should prepare differently or study differently or write differently or take the questions differently. And I think that's important to keep in mind. Hi, Sharmila. Good to see you. Glad to have you with us here today as well. So that's the Georgia situation, at least at this moment. If anyone's got any questions about that, I am glad to answer those as best I can, but looking forward to doing that interview and sharing that particular story. For those of you that are taking or did take the Georgia exam in July, I'm sure that this is not a particularly settling set of events and news stories for you. So, okay, well, let's move on here. A couple of other things. One of the questions I'm getting a lot is, I'm X number of weeks if you're in Florida, or months if you're in California or Georgia or some of these other jurisdictions, until the results are coming out from the July 2016 exam. What should I be doing right now? And I think that there are a couple of answers to that question. One is, I don't recommend studying in between. I don't think it's productive. I don't think there's any value to that. Certainly not if we're looking at your exam results in just a few days. But even for those who won't get their exam results until November, I don't think you should begin your studies now unless you just left for a day of the exam or you didn't fill in 10 questions on the multi-state. I mean, unless there's some really objective evidence that you failed, absolutely. I don't think there's any reason to do that. I do think that this is a good time to get out and kind of reacquaint yourself with the world. We had a couple of students. I don't know if Yara is on with us today, but Yara went down and did some volunteer work. I think it was in Louisiana during her break while she was waiting. And that's pretty cool. I think that's a great way to kind of get out of your own head while you're in this waiting period and to just do some good stuff. And it doesn't have to be dramatic stuff, but I think that doing some volunteer work, maybe doing some volunteer legal work would be a great idea for folks, and giving yourself a chance to get occupied with other things. One of the worst things you can do right now is to just wait and sit there and watch the clock, tick, 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 tick. It's mind-numbing, it's frustrating, and it doesn't get you any closer. So I would really encourage you, job searches, reacquainting with family, getting the kids back to school, whatever it is that's going on in your life, reacquainting yourself with your boss, those things would be good. And when the results come out, they come out, and then jump into whatever you've got to do at that point. Now, I've said elsewhere that I think one of the things you should be doing right now is thinking about, if you didn't pass, what's your strategy going forward? Is it to get more help in preparing for the exam? Is it to take the very next exam? Is it to switch jurisdictions? What is it you want to do? Don't try to make those decisions within 24 or 48 hours of getting your results. Emotionally, that's a very difficult time. And I think that it's hard for people in that circumstance. So I would say you want to do some of that thinking or planning. If you passed, and we assume that you did, then that's great news. And then this was all for nothing. But if you didn't pass, then at least you've had some opportunity to have an objective process going on in your brain before you got to that section. So that's one of the things that's happening. Another question I'm getting. We've got folks on the call today who are taking the exam in 2017. We've got some February and some July 2017. And the question is, what should I be doing right now? I mean, here we are, it's the fall. How much studying should I be doing? So let me give you some basic guidelines. Certainly if you're in our course. If you're not in our course, I think you can extrapolate this. If you're in our course and you're taking the February 2017 exam, my preference and suggestion would be that you would be studying right now about 15 to maybe 20 hours a week. I think 15 to 20 hours a week consistently now would be a good number for you to be aiming at. And if you're taking the exam in July 2017, I would say 10 hours a week would be a perfectly acceptable number of study hours. Now, how do you do that? How do you actually get those hours in? Because I know that that's a challenge, and I get a lot of questions from people who say, I just feel like I'm going too slowly and I'm not making enough progress, and how do I make that happen? So let me share some really practical tips with you. One tip is if you're using an electronic calendar like Google or iCal, something of that nature, go ahead and create an event called Bar Study, and I would make it a 50 or a 55-minute event. I like 55 minutes with 5 minutes off for a break. Now, this event comes with a couple of conditions attached to it. You can't be interrupted during it, and you give yourself a 5 or a 10-minute warning before the event begins. Then what I like to do is duplicate the event and go to my calendar for the next 7 days. And you could do this, Sunday to Sunday, but you could do it Friday to Friday. It doesn't really matter. Whatever, just take the next 7 days and go to your calendar and drop 10, 15, 20 of those individual events into your calendar where they would fit. Now, some of those will go back to back to back. I mean, you might have a 3-hour study session like on a weekend, but they're really essentially still 3 separate events. So 55 minutes, 5-minute break, 55, 5, 55, 5. One of the keys, and I know it sounds really stupid almost, but it actually works, is you don't identify these bar study hours by the topic. In other words, you don't put on your schedule, I'm going to study property on Tuesday from 3 to 4. Because inevitably what happens is it's not property. You went faster or slower and you're on something else, and then all of a sudden you start feeling the pressure because you had arbitrarily said, I want to be in property on Tuesday, but I'm only in torts, or whatever it might be. And I think when you get that approach, then it starts adding to your stress. So one of the things I want you to do here is to go ahead and just set up these 10, 15, 20 study blocks. Set them up by the hour. Then you go to your study guide and you take the next assignment that's on the guide when you've got one of those hours coming up and you work through it. Now, maybe that hour will be long enough to finish the assignment. If so, mark it off as completed and keep moving. If it's not enough, then you just, when you return to your studies, the next time there's a study block, just pick up where you left off in that particular subject or material. So a lecture, a reading, question practice, whatever it might be. What that's going to do is give you a much better opportunity to work through this material without feeling the pressure of feeling behind or arbitrarily setting yourself up for failure, I think, in doing that. So that's one really easy thing that I think you can do, and I really would encourage you to do it. A second thing is to get an accountability group. Now, not everybody knows what an accountability group is. If you know, it's pretty obvious. You get a group of people together, small group, 2, 3, 4 people, and you say, look, I want you to hold me accountable. I'm going to tell you that for the next 7 days, I've set up 10 hours of study. And then at the end of 7 days, I'm going to report back to you on how I did. And I'm giving you the right to let me know if to kick me in the butt if I didn't hit my 10 hours. It's a great way to keep you honest and keep you kind of focused and having to report to somebody else. At work, you have to report to somebody else. If you're like me and you're entrepreneurial, I report to Sarah. Who are we kidding? But basically, it's easy to get kind of lost in the weeds when you're by yourself. So this accountability group is a really good way to be able to keep track of what you're doing and to make sure that you stay on track. And I'm glad, if you're in our course, I'm glad to be on that email list. I keep note of those things as well. And so I love the accountability letters that some people write. They're great. Some people are very sparse, finished all my hours. Other people write this great narrative about all the things they did and the reasons that they did or didn't hit their accountability goals. But I think either way, it's really productive. So that's a second thing that I think you can do that would be very useful. A third thing that I suggest to students when they're struggling with this, how do I schedule and stay up and keep up? You may have heard me talk in previous Facebook Live and podcast episodes about something called paraliminals. These are audio recordings that are really powerful that you just simply put on your headphones and listen to for about 20 minutes each, that are designed to be very focused ways to change your thought process and your activity and your action in these narrow focused areas. Things like procrastination or focused learning or power learning, sleep, relaxation, whatever it might be. I mean, there's typically, when somebody tells me they're having problems keeping up, they'll say, well, it's because I'm feeling stress, or I'm not good at budgeting my time, or I feel overwhelmed, or I'm really having a problem with keeping my focus and concentration. Well, over the years, a company called Learning Strategies had put together a series of these 20-minute audio recordings in MP3 format, which means they're downloadable. You can put them on your phone or your tablet or your computer, and then you've got them and you listen to them, and that's all you have to do. You can listen to them while you're sleeping. You can listen to them while you're sitting in your office. You can't listen to them while you're driving because they do have the potential to put you to sleep, but they're incredibly powerful and very focused. So a couple of months ago, I got together with the folks at Learning Strategies, and we curated a group of 16 very specific paraliminal recordings for bar takers. And we call it the Bar Prep Paraliminal Pack, which is not easy to say, and I don't know why I called it that, given the difficulty of saying it. But in any event, the Paraliminal Pack is now available. You can purchase paraliminals directly from Learning Strategies for, I think they're $40 a piece. But we've put together the whole package of 16 paraliminals for a price of $295, and there's even a coupon code available for our students that reduces the price down a little bit more. I think it's a really powerful tool. I think it's a really great investment of your money, because what it does is you say, I'm having a problem or a challenge with this one thing. I put on this recording, and it really takes away some of those internal blocks and lets you move forward. And I've recommended that to students. They've used these paraliminals, and they've seen great changes and success in their studies. So I think that's a big thing for people to be able to use. The last thing that I wanted to talk about today, the last question that I'm getting from folks is, do I recommend photo reading for bar takers? And if so, why? Because people have heard me talk about it so much. And the answer to that is yes, I do recommend photo reading. I think it's an incredibly powerful tool. I've done a couple of different podcasts and some videos about photo reading. For those of you that are not familiar with it, it's what we call whole mind or whole brain learning. Instead of the conscious mind learning of reading a sentence one word at a time, what photo reading does is allow you to consume material at about 25,000 words a minute. That's in comparison to about 200 words a minute. That's the way most of us read. Lawyers actually read slower than that, about 110 words a minute on average. And to have higher comprehension, and that's the real key. Instead of, when someone reads traditionally, typically, we see about a 60% comprehension rate measured through the MBE. When someone's photo reading, we see not only 25,000 words a minute reading speed, but what we get is a question correct rating of over 74%. It's a huge jump. It's a massive jump on the MBE. And photo reading is relatively easy to learn. It comes, again, from Learning Strategies. There are 7 one-hour lessons. We integrate that into the bar review if you choose to add it to your course. And you begin using it right away. You actually don't have to be expert or master it. You just use it. And for those of you who are using photo reading, I think you're beginning to see, in fact, how powerful it is. For those who used it on the prior exams, we've got lots of folks who swear by it and can't imagine life without photo reading now. So And we'll link up to photo reading and to the paraliminals for those of you that are interested. But I think they're really powerful tools. It's certainly not too late for either of those exams for you to add to your studies. I think they would make a huge difference, and I'd love to see you working with both photo reading and the paraliminals. I think they can improve your understanding of the material and also improve your ability to get the work done and done productively. So I think those are great things. Well, I promised you we'd try and keep this to about a half an hour. I appreciate so many of you coming on board and watching and giving us your thoughts and questions. I know I spent a long time on the Georgia situation, but it's a one-off. It's a pretty crazy deal, and I think we're going to hear a lot more about it as we go on. So, I'll keep you informed as that happens. We're looking for Florida bar results to come in the next, let's see, if I'm right, I think in a week we'll have Florida bar results. So good luck to all the Florida bar takers. And then shortly after that, we should start seeing Florida, Texas, New Jersey. Those would be jurisdictions sort of next on the queue after that. But Florida comes up early and it's first. So good luck to everybody there. Glad to have you all with me. We'll do this every Friday for our Facebook group students. And so want to thank you for spending your time. And for those of you on the podcast, we're glad to have you with us and listening and checking in as well. And we'll have some information on the podcast for how you can get more information about Celebration Bar Review and the things that we have going on. But in any event, glad to have you, and have a great weekend, everyone. And we'll talk to you soon. So bye for now.